Hello everyone, my name is Mr. Big and today I'm going to give a brief summary about the Second World War. First, let's talk about the beginning of the Second World War. It has always been a question that actually when did it happen? When did it begin? Historians nowadays give three dates. One of them is 1931, the Manchuria incident, in which the Japanese later took the province of Manchuria from China. 1937, the Second Sino-Japanese War, which lasted until 1945, and it was a serious part of the Second World War, or the date we teach in Europe is 1939, when Germany attacked Poland without a declaration of war. Now let's talk about the Blitzkrieg or the Lightning War, how Germany could astonishingly occupy most of Europe within 3 years. Well, as you know, before the war in August 1939, the Soviets and the Germans signed a non-aggression pact for 10 years, and in a secret closure of this pact, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, the two countries, the Soviet Union and the Nazi Germany, split up Eastern Europe between themselves, Eastern and Central Europe to be exact. And Poland was parted into two parts. The western part, which belonged to Germany originally, and the eastern part that belonged to the Soviet Union. So in 1st of September 1939, the invasion of Poland began, and it lasted about a month. In October, the whole territory of Poland was occupied by Germany, not the Nazi Germany, and the Soviet Union. Note that the problem was that the Polish army was seriously outnumbered, and it wasn't even that modern than, for example, the Wehrmacht. The story's other part is that Poland seriously believed that France and Britain will intervene in the conflict as the Germans attack them, but there was a declaration of war on Germany by France and Britain on the 3rd of September of 1939, and that's it. Nothing really happened, except one particular thing. And this is the Battle of the Atlantic, probably the longest battle of the Second World War. From 1939 to 1945, the German U-boats hunted British warships, some of them were warships, and the merchant ships and the merchant convoys which carried food, munitions, and other raw materials to Britain. And this lasted for a very long time, and it was a very bloody battle indeed, and a very important one during the Second World War. So, I told about the thing that on the 3rd of September, Britain and France declared war on Germany, but then nothing happened. Well, actually, nothing happened until 1940, and this period between the October of 1939 and the May 1940 is called the phony war, because there was actual war between these countries, but nothing happened, nothing military happened. Of course, except the Battle of the Atlantic. But in May 1940, the Germans started an attack, and first they occupied two countries with which they had no war against, and these countries were Denmark and Norway. And after these countries fell within weeks, the Germans saw the opportunity to take down France as well. And this happened in June 1940, when the Germans successfully invaded Belgium, Netherlands, and then, of course, France. The French gave up on June 9th, the same month, June 1940. A new government, the Vichy government of France, was declared. Marshal Pétain became the president of the new France, and some of the territories of France became German-occupied territories. After taking down France, the Germans wanted to prepare for the invasion of Britain, but the Royal Navy was too powerful to be beaten by only the Kriegsmarine, the German Navy. So the Germans wanted to take down Britain from the air first, and that was an air battle called the Battle of Britain, which also happened in 1940. And the Battle of Britain was a huge deal, because this is the first real defeat of the Germans, because the British could win. Yeah, mostly because the British had a very important invention, the radar. That was one thing. The other thing, that arguably the British had, the Royal Air Force had better airplanes and awesome pilots. After the defeat at the Battle of Britain, the Germans turned the other side, and first they occupied Yugoslavia and Greece, and then they turned to their main objective in 1941, and that was the Soviet Union. In June 1941, the German army, the Wehrmacht, invaded the Soviet Union. At first, the invasion was very successful. The Operation Barbarossa was very successful. The Army Group North could reach Leningrad, and there they started to besiege the city, which lasted for 3 years. That was probably one of the longest sieges in history. Then Army Group Middle could reach the outskirts of Moscow. However, they were beaten off, and Army Group South could take the Ukraine, but they were about to meet their fate in the Battle of Stalingrad. Now let's talk about the turning points of the Second World War. On the 7th of December 1941, the Japanese Navy attacked Pearl Harbor and sunk many warships of the US Pacific Fleet. However, they didn't really harm the US Navy that much, and it gave an opportunity to the United States of America to declare war on Japan and join the Second World War. Actually, Pearl Harbor was not the real turning point. However, it opened the Pacific theater in the Second World War. The real turning point was the Battle of Midway in 1942, where the Americans know exactly the plan of the Japanese and they could achieve a huge victory. That was the end of the Japanese expansion, which started somewhere in the 1930s. The other great turning point happened in North Africa, where at first the Italians tried to take Egypt from the British, and this desert war was pretty much like a pendulum for many months until the Germans sent the Deutsche Afrika Korps with Erwin Rommel as a commander, and the Germans could achieve some victories as well. However, in 1942, at the Battle of El Alamein, actually the second Battle of El Alamein, the new general of the British Eighth Army, Montgomery, could achieve a huge victory, and it became a huge turning point, because from then on the Axis slowly but surely pulled out of North Africa. Just think about on the other hand, also in 1942, the Americans landed in Morocco and Algeria during Operation Torch. So now the Axis were really in trouble in North Africa. This North African success later led to Operation Husky, the occupation of Sicily, and the occupation of Italy by the Allies, which never really ended until the end of the war. The big, huge turning point in Europe was actually the Battle of Stalingrad in 1942-1943, where the Red Army could encircle and defeat the German army soundly on the Eastern Front. Later in 1943, there was the very famous tank battle of Kursk, where the Soviets were again successful, and this meant that the Eastern Front will surely be won by the Soviets. On the Western Front, the turning point was 1944. The invasion of Normandy began on the 6th of June, and as it was not as successful as planned, but it was still successful, so the Western Allies could start the liberation of Western Europe, so France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and later they could reach Germany through the Rhine. Also in 1943-1945, the Soviets started to liberate and occupy the Eastern European countries, and of course some Central European countries as well. And on May 1945, they besieged Berlin, and they could actually take it. By the 7th of May 1945, the new German government signed the armistice, and this was actually the end of World War II in Europe. However, in the Pacific, the war was far from over. The Japanese didn't surrender. They held very harshly at the Pacific, and after the Battle of Okinawa in 1945, the American government decided to drop the newly invented atomic bomb on Japan. The Americans dropped 2 atomic bombs one on the 6th of August on Hiroshima, and on the 9th of August on Nagasaki. On the 2nd of September 1945, the Japanese surrendered, and so the Second World War ended.